welcome to Strength and Conditioning, the bottom line, where I have my man, Rich Williams, 20-year veteran NBA strength and conditioning coach and current strength and conditioning coach for the New York Knicks. And he's going to really dive into his experience and some of the things that you can learn to bring strength and conditioning to what you're doing and use that to impact your life, your performance, and your professionalism going forward. Rich, how you doing, brother?
Man, I'm doing great. Yourself?
Man, can't complain, man. We're taking everything one moment at a time.
I hear you on that.
Dig that. And so today, we want to get a little more nuanced in regards to strength and conditioning. Last time we talked, you mentioned sports science, and you talked about sports science and technologies that could predict injuries and things that you all have or tools that you all have at the highest level in your tool belt. Talk to us a little bit about sports science, how that now is being used in strength and conditioning, and how folks who maybe aren't at the highest levels can implement sports science into what they do.
Well, that's a really good question. It's a really good topic. Sports science is kind of taken off. It's not so much my forte within our group. We have our sports science guy who does a great job, but it relates so much to what my programming entails. So when we talk about sports science could mean so many different things. It could mean to the load of a player, what you're relating to the coach of his workload,
Mm-hmm.
which they use it a lot in the NBA to determine the workload. It could be determined far as, how hard you need to push a guy, and I give a perfect example of that later, but, for me and how I use sports science, I use it in the realm of, how do we push a guy? When do we back off? I give a great example. We have an injured player, and with that injured player, say if we do have an injured player, with that injured player, get him back to return to play.
Mm.
So we use sports science to determine his load during his workouts,
Mm-hmm.
and how he looks for his conditioning. How do we react to that? So with that being said, if we can look at how, basically how quick he's getting tired,
Mm-hmm.
and that
But you can use technology for that, though. That's
what
what
we
you're
use
saying.
technology for that. Exactly.
Gotcha.
We have a system that we use that determines, his workload.
So, well, let's take it a step back. So before, this is 2021. We have all kind of tech at our disposal. Before all of these tools were at your disposal, how would a strength and conditioning coach go about measuring load and measuring capacity and all of that?
Well, that's a really good question, because when I first came in the game, we didn't have anything but to just basically go off your feel,
Mm-hmm.
How tired are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
Mm-hmm.
Then we went to the concept of using heart rate test. VO2 max test determine how conditioned he is. And then once we determine how conditioned he is, we use these zones from his heart rate to determine how hard he should train. For a perfect example, if I created a zone for myself from a conditioning VO2 max test, I would have my zone 1, which is my recovery, and that heart rate could be between 110 and 114. So if I want to recover, I'm staying within those zones.
Interesting.
And then I would go to a zone 2, which is just kind of like my baseline of training. That's a particular zone. Then you got up to zone 3, to zone 4, you get to zone 5, which is my kind of max. That's where I'm pushing myself. Mm-hmm. So back in my day, when I first came in the league, we were using these zones to train our athletes. And then we were just using the scale of 1 to 10. How do you feel? And we just track it.
Hold on. So, and this is interesting because this is strength and conditioning, the bottom line. We're trying to get basically cut to the chase in regards to strength and conditioning. And we know in the NBA, you all have everything at your disposal. I mean, money's really not an object. You have every technique, tool, anything that somebody can conceive, y'all probably have access to it. But let's speak to maybe this up and coming professional league in other parts of the world. Or let's think about maybe an up and coming or high school basketball team or college basketball team or, an upstart pro league that doesn't have these resources. taking it back to looking at what you all had from the beginning, how can they use that now? Because maybe they don't have the resources to go with the high tech stuff that y'all have access to.
Yeah, that's a really good question. When I think of that question, I think of more of not so much sports science, but what are you doing to prepare yourself and use the simple recovery tools, right? Because it's only so much you can do in that aspect. So for those teams who don't have those things, it's so many simple things that we should dive in a later conversation where we're talking about how do athletes recover, how do they train to prepare them for the rigors of the basketball sport. So I'll tell those teams, should step away from sports science, work on those things. Because you know why I say work on those things? Because those things don't take equipment to do.
That's as powerful. And I'm glad you got there, because again, we think about strength and conditioning, the bottom line. And yes, when you have unlimited resources, you have no limits. But there are people that have financial constraints. And so to that point, we have to think about what can we do that doesn't cost a lot of money? What are ways that I can measure, test, and go back to when you first came into the league, how you all were basically just kind of documenting how someone feels, how they react, scale of 1 to 10, and documenting that. Is that something that an up and coming strength and conditioning coach can at least start with? Just documenting.
Most definitely. Yeah, you document it. It actually is I actually miss those days. You know why I miss them? Because it was a line of communication between the player and the strength coach.
Wow.
Ooh. Right? You sit down and you say, how do you feel? Man, I'm tired, man. My leg's tired. This hurt. This is sore. And then you just slowly start to document those things. And then you start, it's kind of like sports science. It's kind of like a natural ability of sports science.
Hold on, stop for a second. So what's interesting in hearing that, now you come to the core, because again, we want to get to the bottom line, strength and conditioning, the bottom line. The bottom line is open and honest communication.
Exactly.
Right? Because it's like, when you think about someone going to a doctor, your doctor can't help you if you're not honest with what's really going on.
Exactly.
And so even if you don't, and so this is for individuals who maybe don't have the resources or the capacity to spend unlimited amounts of money on sports science, you can just start with working on your open back and forth dialogue so that you can at least get an honest place of where that athlete is. Because from there, you can construct a program, or you can figure out something that's going to work for them, correct?
Exactly. You hit it right on the nail. Because like how we do sports science today, it's all computer-aided generated, and you get these reports. But sometimes you can fall in the habit of reading the reports and not actually talking to the player.
So again, strength and conditioning, the bottom line, communication is at the core of it. So yes, you have data, analytics, reports, all of this stuff. But if you don't have communication with the actual athlete, you're going to miss the boat.
You're going to miss the boat. And I truly believe it. Don't get me wrong. Like I try not to get too detailed on sports science, because it could get out there. It can really get out there.
Absolutely.
When we talk about sports science, what I want people to really realize about sports science, it's just a way of tracking the workload of a player. In that workload, players can tell you their workload, right? They can tell you how they feel when they do that certain practice. What sports science does today is it's more specific, and it's more detailed.
You have more data points.
You just have more data points. Exactly. You have just more data points. Back today, our sports science was just communication.
Wow.
And like the old school coaches say, oh, mine is just watching. I know when a player is tired. I know when he has too much. I know when to let up.
Wow, that's powerful.
Sports science it's a difficult topic to talk about. Someday we're going to get an expert in that field to really break it down for us, and then I'm going to show you how to realistically relay that. That's the great thing. That's the funny thing about sports science. There's some great minds out there on sports science. Great mind, but sometimes they run into that problem of how do you relate it?
Man, you dropped that to me. And as we kind of wrap this short segment up today, that is something that's extremely important. Communication, if it's not effective, is pointless. And so you can have all the data points in the world. If you don't have the ability to communicate what's on those data points to the person who needs it so that they can then apply the program that you develop, all of it is really pointless. And you just have random data points.
It's pointless.
So the person listening to this right now, when it comes to strength and conditioning, the bottom line, as we think about sports science, before you get into the science, start with the relationship and start by learning how to effectively communicate with your athlete.
Exactly. Start there. And that's why I told you when you talk about sports science with the people who can't afford the bells and whistles, that's why I talk about going back to the basics of teaching them the certain recovery things, the certain training programs, program, because that helps you get to know the athlete. Start there. Start there.
Man. You know what? I think when it comes down to it, strength and conditioning, the bottom line, first, get to know your athlete.
Exactly.
All right. Well, hey, this is Strength and Conditioning, the bottom line. I'm Mike Dorsey, and we are with my man, 20-year NBA veteran strength and conditioning coach, Rich Williams. And we'll talk to you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you, brother.